Karen insulted Judge Judy by calling her an old woman. What followed wasn't just a sharp response that shut down the courtroom. It crushed Karen so thoroughly that she tried to flee in tears. But Judge Judy wasn't finished yet. What came next turned into one of the most iconic moments in courtroom television history. By the end of this story, it becomes clear why millions still watch this clip whenever they want to see real justice delivered. Before we get into this unforgettable case, drop a comment saying where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing viewers from around the world. And make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss more shocking cases like this one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The woman sitting across from America's toughest judge had no idea she was about to become a warning to everyone else. Karen Mitchell, a 42-year-old real estate agent from suburban Phoenix, entered the courtroom carrying the kind of entitlement that only comes from years of winning arguments through tantrums and intimidation. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that familiar, "let me speak to your manager" style. She gripped her designer purse like a weapon, and her eyes reflected the icy confidence of someone who believed no one could stand up to her. What she didn't realize was that she had never faced Judge Judy Sheindlin. This was no ordinary courtroom encounter. This was the moment when relentless entitlement collided with unmovable justice. Judge Judy had spent decades slicing through lies, exposing frauds, and handing out reality checks to people who believed they were untouchable. At 78 years old, she had seen every kind of scammer, manipulator, and liar imaginable. But Karen was different. She was about to become the perfect example of what happens when delusion meets uncompromising truth. On paper, the case looked simple. Karen claimed her security deposit had been unfairly withheld. But within minutes, it became something else entirely. A lesson in how a single moment of disrespect can cause someone's entire world to unravel. Karen assumed Judge Judy was just another authority figure she could overpower. She had no idea she was about to endure the most humiliating 15 minutes of her life, broadcast to millions who would watch her downfall with satisfaction. If you enjoy seeing entitled people face consequences, hit subscribe and let's step into the courtroom, where Karen would soon regret ever hearing the name Judge Judy. What followed wasn't just a clever remark. It was a complete destruction that proved some people only learn respect the hard way. The studio lights cast their familiar, harsh glow across America's most famous courtroom, a place where egos were stripped down and reputations were dismantled. This wasn't merely a TV set. It was Judge Judy's territory, where her word was final and her gavel delivered judgment on human foolishness. The deep burgundy walls had witnessed countless confrontations. But today, they were about to see something extraordinary. The total breakdown of a woman who believed she was beyond accountability. Judge Judy Sheindlin sat elevated behind her bench like royalty on a throne, her silver hair immaculate, her glasses resting with authority, and her unmistakable scowl already forming as she reviewed the file. After decades of exposing liars on national television, she had developed an almost instinctive ability to detect entitlement from across the room. Her sharp gaze, which had reduced grown men to confession, was about to lock onto the perfect target. This was a woman who had spent 25 years as a family court judge before becoming a television legend, who authored best-selling books, and who earned every ounce of respect that was about to be so disastrously denied. The gallery buzzed with the usual mix of curiosity and daytime TV fans. But something felt different. It was as if everyone sensed history was about to unfold. The bailiff stood alert, well aware of Judge Judy's mood. The court reporter hovered over her keyboard, ready to capture words that would soon be quoted for years. Then Karen Mitchell walked in. And everything shifted. She strutted through the doors with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences. Her designer heels clicking like a countdown to disaster, standing 5'6" and clearly accustomed to throwing her weight around in every sense. Karen moved with the swagger of someone who had spent years demanding managers and getting her way. Through sheer obnoxious force, her oversized knockoff Gucci sunglasses stayed on her head indoors. Her acrylic nails were painted an aggressive red that matched her lipstick, and everything about her attitude screamed, "I'm about to make this everyone else's problem." What made Karen especially dangerous wasn't just her entitlement tick, was her complete inability to read the room. While most people entered Judge Judy's courtroom with at least some awareness of who they were facing, Karen scanned the space like she was sizing up her next victim. She clearly hadn't researched Judge Judy's reputation for verbal annihilation and genuinely believed her usual intimidation tactics would work here, just as they had at every coffee shop and store. She'd bullied before. The case itself perfectly reflected Karen's approach to life. She had rented a luxury apartment for what she claimed was a business retreat, but instead used it for loud parties that led to noise complaints, property damage, and her eviction. The landlord kept her $2,500 security deposit to cover cleaning costs, carpet replacement, and repairs to a cracked bathroom mirror damaged during one of her gatherings. But in Karen's mind, she was the victim. The landlord was unfair. The neighbors were overly sensitive. Everyone else was at fault. As she took her position at the podium, her body language said everything. She didn't stand respectfully. She posed, hip cocked, arms crossed, wearing a smirk that suggested she was about to educate everyone on how things really worked. She carried a thick folder of what she believed was evidence, mostly angry emails she'd sent and photos that she thought proved her case but actually showed her responsibility. Most revealing of all, she kept looking around the room as if waiting to be recognized, unaware she was about to become famous for entirely the wrong reasons. Judge Judy never took her eyes off Karen during this display. Experience had taught her to let difficult litigants expose themselves before beginning the takedown. She already saw the entitlement, the disrespect, the complete lack of self-awareness that would make what followed so inevitable. Karen didn't realize she was being examined by an expert. Her flaws noted, her downfall already written by her own actions. Everything was in place. The courtroom was ready. And when Judge Judy finally asked Karen to explain her case, it became clear this would be anything but ordinary. Karen didn't simply present her side. She launched into a performance one that would have been laughable if it weren't so aggravating. Her voice carried the familiar tone of someone who had spent years overpowering customer service workers and PTA meetings. Every word soaked in condescension that instantly set nerves on edge. "Well, Your Honor," Karen began. But the way she said Your Honor sounded like she was talking to a slow child. "This landlord is clearly trying to cheat me out of my money because he knows I'm a successful businesswoman and thinks he can get away with it." She waved her red acrylic nails dramatically, her voice growing louder with every invented injustice. "I left that apartment in perfect condition, completely spotless. And now he's inventing all these ridiculous charges just because I know my rights." Judge Judy's eyebrows didn't move. Anyone familiar with her courtroom knew that silence meant trouble was coming. She allowed Karen to continue, watching as the woman buried herself deeper with every entitled word. Karen, completely unaware of the warning signs, took the silence as encouragement to push further. "And another thing," Karen went on, her tone rising and turning aggressive. "I don't appreciate being dragged in here like some kind of criminal when it's obvious this man is just trying to." She was cut off when Judge Judy lifted one finger, the universal signal that had silenced countless litigants before her. "Excuse me?" Judge Judy's voice was dangerously calm, the kind of quiet that made sensible people immediately apologize and stop talking. But Karen wasn't sensible. Instead of backing down, she rolled her eyes. A visible shock rippled through the gallery. People exchanged looks, some covering their mouths as they waited for what was coming. The bailiff shifted slightly, recognizing the signs of an imminent Judge Judy eruption. "Did you just roll your eyes at me?" Judge Judy asked, her voice dropping into that ominous tone every longtime viewer recognized as the beginning of destruction. Incredibly, Karen doubled down. "Look, I'm just trying to explain what happened, but if you're not going to listen to me, then what's the point of being here?" She even sighed dramatically, as if Judge Judy were wasting her valuable time. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the camera operators appeared frozen. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her famous stare locking onto Karen like a laser. Years of dealing with entitled people had taught her to recognize the precise moment someone crossed from simple disrespect into full delusion. And Karen had just crossed it. "You know what, sweetheart?" Judge Judy said. Everyone in the room knew that when she used that word in that tone, someone was about to become a lesson. Karen, still oblivious to the depth of trouble she was in, actually smirked. That smirk would be the last confident expression she wore that day, because she had just lit the fuse on a bomb about to explode in her face. And Judge Judy was about to remind her exactly who she was dealing with. The tension was complete. The stage was set. And Karen had no idea she was about to become internet famous for all the wrong reasons. What followed would be replayed millions of times online, analyzed by legal commentators, and turned into memes that would outlast everyone in that room. Judge Judy had given Karen every chance to show respect, to understand where she was and who she was facing. Instead, Karen chose what could only be described as professional suicide on live television. "Listen here, sweetheart." Judge Judy's voice sharpened into that razor-edged tone that signaled a painful lesson was coming. "You seem to think you're running this courtroom? Let me explain something to you." That was when Karen Mitchell made the decision that would haunt her forever. Rather than listening, rather than showing even a hint of respect for a woman who had built a career dismantling people just like her, Karen threw her hands up in frustration and spat out the words that sealed her fate. "Oh, please, listen here, old lady. I don't have time for your little power trip." The words burst from her mouth like poison, every syllable loaded with contempt. "I'm a successful businesswoman," Karen snapped. "And I don't need some cranky old judge lecturing me about respect when you clearly have no idea what you're talking about." The silence afterward was crushing. Not the polite quiet of people waiting their turn, but the shocked, horrified stillness of a room witnessing a catastrophic mistake. It felt like someone had barged into a church screaming profanities or slapped a police officer during a traffic stop. The gallery sat rigid, mouths literally open, struggling to process what they just heard. Judge Judy's face shifted in a way that seemed almost unreal. The professional calm she'd carried for decades vanished, replaced by something far more dangerous, the cold fury of a woman who had earned every ounce of respect Karen had just casually dismissed. Her eyes narrowed to pinpoints, her jaw tightened, and for a moment that stretched like forever. She simply stared at Karen with a look that should have made her burst into flames on the spot. And incredibly, Karen seemed to think she'd just delivered a winning speech. She even nodded to herself, satisfied with her own performance. Completely unaware she had just committed career suicide on national television. She had no idea that millions of viewers were watching her ruin herself, that this moment would be shared again and again until it became legendary, that she had just handed Judge Judy everything she needed to obliterate her so completely she'd become a cautionary tale. The courtroom held its breath. The camera zoomed in on Judge Judy's face, catching the exact moment America's toughest judge decided Karen Mitchell was about to learn the hardest lesson of her entitled life. The fuse was lit. The bomb was seconds from going off, and Karen had no idea she was standing at ground zero of her own destruction. The change in Judge Judy's demeanor was like watching a master swordsman draw a blade. Her voice dropped into that deadly whisper that had made hardened criminals confess their sins. And when she spoke, every word landed with surgical precision designed to do maximum damage. "Old lady?" Judge Judy repeated it slowly, letting it sit there, her eyes never leaving Karen. "Old lady." Her voice lifted just enough to make Karen flinch. And that's when America's most feared judge began the systematic dismantling that would become legendary. "Let me tell you something about this old lady, you pathetic excuse for a human being." Judge Judy's words sliced through the air like razors. "This old lady has been practicing law longer than you've been alive. This old lady was tearing down liars and frauds like you when you were still wetting your bed. This old lady has forgotten more about respect, intelligence, and basic human decency than you will ever learn in your miserable, entitled little life." Karen's smug expression started to crack like ice under sunlight. The confidence that carried her through the beginning of the hearing began to drain away as she realized she wasn't dealing with some weak authority figure she could intimidate. She was facing a woman who built an empire on destroying people exactly like her Aunt Karen had just handed her every weapon needed for total annihilation. "You want to talk about being a successful businesswoman?" Judge Judy continued, her voice building like a freight train. "This old lady has built a career worth hundreds of millions of dollars by exposing fraudulent, lying, disrespectful pieces of garbage like you. This old lady has written best-selling books, changed the legal system, and earned the respect of millions of people while you've been bullying teenagers at Starbucks and screaming at retail workers." The gallery was losing it. People covered their mouths to stop themselves from cheering out loud. Some were recording on their phones despite the no recording rule, and everyone was witnessing the kind of verbal destruction that would be talked about for decades. Karen's face shifted from entitled smugness to horrified understanding as every word hit like a physical blow. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. She leaned forward, eyes drilling into Karen, and delivered the knockout punch that would become the most quoted comeback in television history. "You know what the difference is between you and this old lady, sweetheart?" Judge Judy said. "This old lady earned her respect through decades of hard work, intelligence, and integrity. You demand respect while contributing absolutely nothing to society except noise complaints and the kind of toxic entitlement that makes decent people cross the street to avoid you. This old lady has helped thousands of people find justice. You can't even take responsibility for trashing an apartment like the overgrown toddler you are." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For the first time in what was probably decades, she had nothing to say. The woman who had spent her entire adult life talking over people, demanding managers, and bulldozing her way through every situation had finally met someone who not only matched her energy, but crushed her with pure facts and devastating truth. "And let me tell you something else about this old lady," Judge Judy continued, sensing Karen's total defeat and choosing to twist the knife. "This old lady is about to cost you $2,500 plus court costs. Because not only are you losing this case, you're paying every penny your landlord is asking for. Why? Because this old lady can smell a liar from across the room. And you, sweetheart, reek of dishonesty and entitlement." The courtroom erupted. People clapped, laughed, and cheered as Karen stood there completely wrecked, her face burning with humiliation and her entitled world collapsing around her. She had called Judge Judy an old lady, and that old lady had just ended her whole existence on live television. If you're loving this courtroom justice, smash that like button because Judge Judy is just getting started destroying this entitled Karen who thought she could disrespect a legend. What followed Judge Judy's epic takedown was a masterclass in what complete defeat looks like on a human face. Karen Mitchell stood at the podium like a deflated balloon, all the air drained from her entitled existence by a woman who had just reminded her how small she truly was. The smirk was gone, replaced by a stunned, horrified look as the full weight of her humiliation settled in. She tried to speak, opening her mouth again and again, but nothing came out only the weak, pathetic sounds of someone whose entire worldview had just been shattered on national television. I didn't mean, Karen finally stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Every trace of her earlier arrogance completely gone. But Judge Judy had no interest in her retreat. "Oh, but you did mean it," Judge Judy cut in with surgical precision. "You meant every disrespectful word that came out of your mouth, and now you're going to live with the consequences. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,500 plus court costs. Case dismissed. Get out of my courtroom." The gavel slammed down like thunder, sealing Karen's fate with a finality that echoed through the studio. The gallery erupted into sustained applause. People were literally standing to cheer Judge Judy's demolition. The bailiff tried to keep his professional composure, but even he couldn't hide the satisfied smile at the corners of his mouth. This was the kind of justice that made people believe in the system. Again, Karen's exit may have been the most humiliating part of the entire ordeal. She collected her papers with trembling hands, her designer bag pressed to her chest like a shield, her face burning as the crowd continued celebrating her destruction. She couldn't meet anyone's eyes as she shuffled toward the exit. The same heels that had clicked with confident arrogance now barely made a sound as she tried to disappear, but the worst moment came at the courtroom doors. She turned back for one last look, maybe hoping for some sign this nightmare wasn't real. Instead, she saw Judge Judy still staring at her with unmistakable contempt, and the gallery still buzzing with excitement over what they had just witnessed. Within hours, clips of the exchange were trending across every social media platform. Old Lady became a rallying cry for respecting elders and experience. Karen's destruction was shared millions of times, turned into memes, and dissected by legal experts who called it one of the most satisfying moments in television history. The woman who had strutted into that courtroom thinking she could intimidate America's toughest judge had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of entitlement. Karen Mitchell wanted to be remembered. She just never imagined it would be as the woman who called Judge Judy an old lady and got completely obliterated for it. Justice had been served, and it tasted perfect. The Karen Mitchell courtroom destruction became more than viral entertainment. It became a cultural moment that captured why respect isn't something you demand, something you earn. In a world where entitlement often seems rewarded and amplified, Judge Judy's savage takedown reminded millions that actions still have consequences, and disrespect still comes with a price. What made the moment so powerful wasn't only the spectacle of Karen's downfall, but what it represented about the clash between earned authority and manufactured entitlement. Judge Judy didn't become America's most respected television judge by accident. She built her reputation through decades of hard work, legal skill, and an unwavering commitment to truth and justice. She earned the right to sit behind that bench, earned the respect of millions, and most importantly, earned the authority to destroy people who thought they could disrespect her without consequences. Karen, on the other hand, represented everything wrong with modern entitlement culture. She walked into that courtroom believing her usual tactics, intimidation, and volume would work, that she could bulldoze yet another authority figure into giving her what she wanted. She had no respect for experience, no appreciation for earned wisdom, and no understanding that some people simply cannot be intimidated. Her downfall was inevitable from the moment she decided her manufactured importance mattered more than Judge Judy's decades of earned respect. The lesson goes far beyond one courtroom encounter. In every workplace, every community, and every interaction, there are people who have earned their positions through hard work, dedication, and proven competence. They deserve respect not because of titles, but because of what they've done to earn those titles. When we dismiss experience as meaningless, treat wisdom as weakness, and mistake loudness for authority. We set ourselves up for the kind of humiliating reality check Karen received. But maybe the most satisfying part of this story is that justice was delivered without violence or cruelty, only through pure, undeniable truth. Judge Judy didn't destroy Karen with lies or cheap personal attacks. She destroyed her with facts, earned authority, and the kind of verbal precision that comes from decades of dealing with people who think they're above accountability. Karen's humiliation was entirely self-inflicted, the natural result of her disrespect colliding with someone who simply refused to tolerate it. This moment reminds us that in a world full of Karens demanding managers and trying to bully their way through life, there are still Judge Judys out there, people who have earned the right to push back, who refuse to be intimidated, and who serve justice with a smile. The old lady Karen tried to dismiss turned out to be the most powerful woman she had ever faced. And the lesson she learned that day was one millions of people got to enjoy watching. If you want to see more entitled people get the reality checks they deserve, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below about the most disrespectful Karen you've ever encountered. And don't forget to smash that like button if Judge Judy's legendary comeback made your day. Because in a world that sometimes feels like it rewards bad behavior, moments like this remind us that real justice still exists. And sometimes it comes from the most unexpected old ladies who refuse to take anyone's nonsense.